Glad to be here. I was asked to give a big picture about energy transitions, which is something I'm always keen to do because too few people appreciate how difficult it will be, how expensive it will be, and how long it will take. My experience over the past decade or so is that it's especially difficult in Europe, because Europeans think they are somehow extraordinarily green, which they are not really. Flying to Thailand over the weekend is not very green, really. Flying for 29 euro from, I was in Helsinki a few days ago, 29 euro from Helsinki to Cyprus, that's not very green, because flying is the most energy-intensive way of human transportation. But for some reason, Europeans think they are greener than anybody else. They aren't. But more importantly, they think that we can somehow do this, if not by next Monday, by 2030. These ideas, everything will be fossil fuels, decarbonization, whatever. So I will take you through. I'm an old-fashioned scientist, so it's numbers, 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 right? Nothing qualitative. Qualitative doesn't take you anywhere. If you don't appreciate numbers, you are dead in water, right? There is nothing new. There is nothing new about transitions. Well, truly you are. If you have 2 meters, this is Norway. If you have 2 meters and your ship has a draft 6 meters, well, you are totally dead in there. So there is nothing new about transition. People talk about transition like, this is something new, that energy transition from A to Z, No, we've been always transitioning for the past 200 years, right? We used to be all traditional biofuels, right? Wood. If you were deforested in North China, well, then crop residues, straw, stalks, sorghum stalks, even roots, right? And then we started to run into coal, really. And then we eventually started to run into, of course, crude oil and natural gas and then hydroelectricity. And so transitions have been happening every day. You see, even before, suppose you would go to 1300, transition was underway because it was a totally biofuel world. Everything was just bioenergy. However, if you were rich, you didn't want to burn wood. You shelled out money for charcoal because charcoal was so much cleaner, right? You could burn it inside, no smoke, really, right? Burning wood inside, lots of smoke, inconvenient, really. Small volume, really, right? So we've been transiting to better fuels, to more efficient, to more storable, more convenient fuels all the time. This is where we are today, and as you see, we are at a particularly interesting point in history. These big chunks, right? The coal, oil, and natural gas, they're almost the same. Natural gas is a little smaller, about 28% this year, right? And oil is about over 30. So before that, coal used to be dominant. In early 1970s, before the first OPEC crisis, oil was dominant, more than 40%, really. And then, of course, coal went down, oil went slightly down, and natural gas is going up. Funny thing about natural gas, which shows how difficult any future transition will be, the transition from coal and oil to natural gas has been much slower than transition from coal to oil. Right? Gas is a funny thing, it's a gas, so transporting is not easy. Transporting between continents, you have to liquefy, minus 162 degrees Celsius, so it's expensive. Really. So this just gives you the foretaste of difficulties. So this transition is unique because we don't do it because we don't have enough. There is plenty out there. In this room, let's say, 15 years ago, you would be asking questions, how about the peak oil? Everybody's writing about peak oil in 2004, 2005. No peak oil. There'll be no peak oil for ages to come. There is plenty of hydrocarbons in the crust. There's plenty of coal. We have plenty of resources. So we are not running to something else because of resource shortages. We are not running because of economic reasons. Coal and oil and gas are cheap and getting cheaper, actually, in real terms, really. And there is no technical reason to do so because our gas turbines and our steam generators and our internal combustion engines are pretty efficient and highly reliable, right? So we are doing it just basically because of one thing, because we think, that the global warming will get us and we should decarbonize as fast as possible. So in that sense, it's unique, right? What's very difficult for most people to appreciate, because they don't even have that concept, is that for the first time, this will be a transition which will move down in terms of power density. And that's a very simple, powerful concept, watts per square meter. How many square meters you need to realize a watt of useful power? It's a tricky thing. Let's do a simple one. When you grow crops, it's always less than watt per square meter. So if I grow my crop, so let's say you say, for example, I will fly to Thailand on biofuel. I will have a bio-kerosene, right? Well, that kerosene will be produced what? At a density of less than 1 watt per square meter. And that's the crop itself. Then you have to convert into kerosene. So I will need, like whatever, 10,000 hectares to grow that crop to fuel my Boeing 787 to go to Thailand. On the other hand, when I'm producing crude oil I produce something at the order of 10 to 3, right? I have a little well, right? And around it on the ground, or in the sea, very small area. So I can produce my fossil fuels at high power density. Think of it that all production of all fossil fuels on this planet, all coal, all natural gas, and even if you add the hydroelectricity and nuclear power plants, the total area of that land is less than Greece, right? Total area. So our energy system takes very little space today as it is. If we go into biofuels, if we go into wind, because you cannot stack these wind turbines like that, right? They have to be apart, right? And solar is pretty good. Solar is something on the order of, 10, 20, 30 watts, but still, it's an order or orders of magnitude less than coal. So we are running in a system which will take lots of space, but more importantly, we are running into something which, let me start with this one. We are running into something which is not, or we are running away from something which is not easily replaceable. The first UN Convention on Climate Change was in 1992, right? And if you look at the worldwide share of fossil fuels in 1990, what is called the primary energy, right? Coal, oil, natural gas, and hydroelectricity, nuclear, solar, wind. Primary energy, not the electricity made from burning fossil fuels. So 1990, 91% of world energy came from fossil fuels. In 2019, it's 89%. Right? So it took us 2 decades to travel from 91 to 89%. You may see different statistics somewhere, because if you look at the International Energy Agency statistics, they will show you that we only use 80% of fossil fuels. Because those people do one thing which I don't like doing. They include traditional biofuels in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, which nobody counts properly. It's just an estimate. Nobody counts. Children go to a nearby forest and bring some twigs and they cook dinner, really, right? Nobody. So this is just the estimate. So we are mixing very good numbers. We know exactly how much gas, oil, and coal we produce and how much hydroelectricity we generate. Well, we do not know how many twigs the children bring in Tanzania for mom to cook the dinner, really, right? But if you include, that's about 8% now, whatever. So if you include these traditional biofuels, then you will see this figure about 80%, right? Rather than 89%, right? But it's irrelevant, right? If it's 89 or 80%, depending on accounting, we are what we are. We are fundamentally a fossil fuel civilization, right? And as you see, we are not running away from it. We are just moving away very gradually, and this gradual moving will continue. Now, of course, it's a little bit better with electricity, right? Because as you see, electricity is more diversified, so we have this clean, whatever, hydro, nuclear, wind. But as you see, in terms of fossil fuel, actually, we generate now more electricity worldwide from fossil fuels than we generated in 1950. And that's, of course, the China effect, right? Because China just been engaged in the most massive construction of large 1 gigawatt plus coal-fired power plants over the last 20 years. Imagine that between 2005 and 2015, for most of the years, they put in every year more capacity than the total capacity of Germany or France or England. Right? And took them 100 years to build that. And China put every year, 60 gigawatts, 50 gigawatts, 70 gigawatts like that. So actually, globally, we are about 2/3 now. 2018, about 66%, right? And of course, there is hydro. But in terms of hydro, many people have a decent share, but there are only 4 constituencies on this planet who are lucky. And that's Norway, 100%. That's the province where I live, Manitoba, 100%, Quebec, 100%, and British Columbia. 3 provinces in Canada and Norway, right? These are the only places in the world which are 100% hydro, right? Some people are 90%, some 80%, some 16%, whatever, and some 0%, really, like Poland, really, right? So just burning coal, right? But as you see this thing, look at the end of it, this thing is moving very, very slowly. If you end up wind and solar to raise about, this year about 7%, really. So in terms of fossil fuels, 90% fossil, right? In terms of this, what I call the new renewables, wind and solar, it's on the order of 7% this year, right? So we have a very, very, very long way to go to start replacing it. Now, if you again use this 1992, when we started to move away the first UN Climate Convention, since 1992, everything has increased by massive amounts globally. Oil, coal up 70%, that's the China effect, right? oil by nearly 50%, gas by 80%, fossil fuels altogether by 50%. So since the day we started to worry officially, internationally about global warming, right, we increase all of these things by a huge margin, right? More importantly, there are these things which I call the 4 pillars of modern civilization. I'll get into it later in some detail. Ammonia, cement, plastics, and pig iron from which you make steel. Look at the margins there. Ammonia 60% up, cement more than threefold up, pig iron about double, okay? Motor vehicles about doubled, right, against the China effect, right? We are producing close to 100 million new motor vehicles a year, really, right? And the mass of these vehicles, I'm just using the American number here, but similar for Europe, mass of the vehicles have been going steadily up. You've noticed, right? You don't have to study. Cars are getting heavier and heavier and bigger, right? And the one, of course, where Europe is the most guilty party, airplane deliveries, 2.5 times up, really, right? I arrived here on Saturday afternoon, and just before my flight from Helsinki, from Copenhagen, 3 flights, 2 from Cyprus, 1 from Malaga, right? From a little place like that, within 5 minutes, right? So this is going up and up and up. As a result, carbon dioxide from fossil fuel combustion since 1992, nearly 60% up. So the fundamental conclusion number 1, we have been running into carbon, not away from carbon. The society is becoming more carbon intensive, not less carbon intensive, right? And the scale is huge. Those of you appreciate numbers, it's now 10 billion tons of carbon we burn every year. CO2 versus C, 3.66. So we have 37 billion tons of CO2 puffed up into atmosphere every year. 37 billion tons, right? In terms of prime energy, it's more than 17 terawatts. Okay? So scales like this, you see, last time when we transited from wood to coal, it was less than 1 billion tons of wood to replace. Now it's 10 billion tons of carbon to replace, right? So the scales are just simply immense. Those of you who follow this, you know that the latest IPCC report in fall 2018 said it's not 4 degrees, it's not 3 degrees, it's not even 2 degrees. We now should feed it in 1.5 degrees. We should keep it below 1.5 degrees, right? This is what it would require, right? As I said, we are basically running into carbon, slowly still increasing. And to reach 1.5 degrees, and to go below that, we would just simply, within a year or 2 or 3, we have to reverse it and just plunge all the way. So by 2050, we will be at 0, but that's not enough, actually below 0, right? We should have a net reduction, right? As they say in English, snowball chance in hell that this will happen, really, because don't forget we are running into that carbon and we are still at 90%, really, right? So, but you know, with computers you can model these things. They modeled 300 things. You know, with computers you just simply put 2 variables and push the button and it's easy. What does it mean, right? Now let's have a closer look what people can do with it individually. There are countries which don't have to do anything, right? Norway. Somebody told me yesterday that Norway installed a solar farm. Really, please, you know, a country which has so much hydroelectricity and you can build so much more. You could feed half of Europe with surplus hydroelectricity and you are installing solar farms. What for? That hydro works for you. What is the load factor of your hydro? Well, 100% works for you all the time. You don't have to have any other reserve generation, right? Hydro will stop, I will need coal or nuclear, right? Why would you go into wind? This is a cloudy part of the world, really. Germans, I'll tell you in a while, they got deeper into wind. You know what is the average load factor of, deeper into solar. What is the average solar load in Germany? 11%. That thing doesn't work 89% of the time. What's the point of installing it in a big industrial economy like Germany when I have to reserve for it to something else to run 89% of the time, right? I'll show you figures later. So as a result, energy when Germany was nothing short of disaster, right? Okay, here are a few figures, just very briefly. See, the other fossil fuels, and they just basically, I should have the one for 2018, but actually very little change. Basically, the total consumption of fossil fuels has remained pretty much the same. This is what people don't realize. Right? What has happened that the capacity in terms of renewables is now actually larger than fossil fuels. So Germans now have 2 energy systems. The old one based on brown coal and Steinkohle, on hard and brown coal, pretty much the same for the past 20 years. And they built up from zero a new system, which now in terms of capacity is larger. This one is about 90 gigawatts, the other is about 110 gigawatts. So you have 2 systems to generate what? pretty much the same amount of electricity. As a result, they have what? The highest electricity prices in the Western world, except for Denmark, right? Interestingly, the people who are most aggressively into renewables have the highest electricity prices: Germany, Denmark, and California, right? People always tell you about, how the cost of photovoltaic cells is plunging. Cost of photovoltaic cell is not the cost of delivered electricity. There is a big difference there, right? Because if it works for me 11% of the time in Germany, I have to have a capacity of something else, that coal, right? To shove it in 89% of the time when it doesn't work. It cost them more than $500 billion since 1990, and here is the bottom of it, right? So here is what they have done. So basically, it was a Stromerzeugung. It wasn't, it's overwhelmingly has done with electricity production. It didn't do much with total coal or oil and gas consumption. So what they have done, the bottom line is interesting, that CO2 emissions have been reduced by 11% as a result of it, more than $500 billion, right? The American CO2 emissions have been reduced by 12% during the same time, by doing nothing but letting the market work. The US always has been heavily dependent on coal generation. Many of these coal plants have been getting old, and above all, compared to natural gas, it just doesn't much sense to run them really. So what happened since 2000, coal plants have been closing like crazy in the US, and natural gas, which is now cheap and abundant because of fracking, has been going up and up. 20 years ago, more than half of the US electricity came from burning coal, right? Now it's just barely above 25%, and before too long it will be 20%, and before too long it will disappear, right? So just basically replacing coal by natural gas, Americans achieved a higher reduction percentage-wise of CO2 than Germans going through the Energiewende. So lesson number 2 here, that the best thing which could be done in a short term to lower the carbon footprint of Western civilization is to convert from coal to natural gas as fast as possible. So if this would be the rational continent, people would come to you, and Germans would come to you and say, we will try to close down our coal-fired power plants as fast as we can, and we'll take your natural gas or anybody's natural gas, right? American fracking gas, whatever, right? This would have reduced their carbon footprint much faster than installing solar in places like Nuremberg, where you see sun like, twice a year, or Munich. Or anytime you fly to Munich, right, it's overcast and, thunderstorms and delays and whatever, and, so anyway. So this is the German makeup. You see the coal is still dominant, right? This is the coal thing, right? And this is the wind thing, right? So not much has changed except lots of money, right? And of course, this is what happens. Germans, in their wisdom, decided that what is generated in this new clean power has a preference, right? So when there is a sunny and windy day in Germany, it's a mayhem, because you have to buy that wind and solar power, really. But let's say suppose it's Sunday, really, right? And people are at the lake, and industries are closed down. So they happen what? They have to be dumping it. They have to be discarding things, right? They have to close down their coal-fired power plants. It's not so easy to close down power plant like, on and off. Gas turbine is easy, right? That's your jet engine, right? You can close it on and off just like that. But they have to close down, and they have to take it. But even then, they are dumping it. So already you see what they are dumping. They are dumping huge amounts of electricity during sunny and windy days when there is a low demand, because by law they have to take it preferentially, right? Now, when people look ahead, they think, oh yeah, this is different now. Past transitions were difficult. This one will be easy because after all, this is the Moore's law. Everything is moving, like we've achieved this marvels of this computing, cell phones, artificial intelligence, whatever. And Moore's law is basically you double the concentration, the number of components, transistors, other components on a microchip every 2 years. And it's been going on since 1965, and everything we have, this electronic, is the result of it, right? But this is not true. This is true only about the electronics. This is true only about crowding components on a microchip. Otherwise, it's not true at all, right? So this is the Moore's law. If you look at the world, the real world of energy and materials, things are progressing very slowly. And I give you few examples here, right? Most of our electricity is generated by steam turbines, right? We burn something, oil, natural gas, and rotate steam turbine. Improvements in past century, we always improve the efficiency, 1.5% a year, right? Not 35% a year, as Moore's law would have it. Passenger car efficiency, our cars getting efficient, especially since '73, after the first oil crisis, right? 2.5% a year, right? Lights are always getting better, right? You know, incandescent, fluorescent, now LEDs, whatever. Pretty good. Lights are pretty good. Less than 3% a year, right? Speed of intercontinental travel hasn't improved since 1958. 1958, we got Boeing 707 in October, and it flew 900 kilometers per hour. Today, you fly to Cyprus for 29 euro, it's still 900 kilometers per hour, right? So actually, this thing improved between 19 and 1958, you know, from piston engines to jet, but that's things. And of course, the intensities improve as well. We produce steel with less energy, but about, you know, minus 2% a year, and we produce ammonia, which I will talk about briefly in a short while, about 3%. So nothing in the real world moves like Moore's law, right? Everything moves constantly. We are very inventive species. We always think do better, but you know, 1%, 2%, I could have shown you, everybody has to eat. Increase of the crop yields, right? Corn, wheat, rice, 1.5%, 2% a year, the same thing, really, right? So this is the tempo of the improvements, right? Let's skip that one. Let's skip that one. Now, so far, as I pointed out, this German transition hasn't been an energy transition. They burn about the same amount of coal and same amount of natural gas, too little natural gas, actually. It's been largely electricity transition. And this is what people forget, that only a minority of primary energy, a minor share of those 10 billion tons of carbon is converted to electricity. Globally, it's about 20%, right? And the rest of it goes to something else, to transportation, to household and services, and very important are non-energy uses, and the figures for US are higher. Now, this is the real challenge, you know. If the transition to non-carbon electricity is difficult, at least we have the means. We could decide collectively we'll have nuclear, right? And we can go nuclear, right? Or we could decide, well, like Germany, we invest trillions of dollars into wind and solar, and we could go wind and solar, right? Not 100%, but significant percentage. But these are difficult, right? What do you do? How do you totally, you know, decarbonize transportation, household services, and non-energy uses? It's really challenging, right? This is 1905, and this is Thomas Edison with his favorite vehicle, electric car, right? Edison being an electric man, so, you know, this is it, showing probably the batteries inside, right? Now, of course, we got electric car, right? This is the land of Tesla. Sometimes I give lectures about Tesla company and Elon Musk. You must be aware of the fact that Elon Musk is a fraudster extraordinaire, right? A man who was condemned by Security Exchange Commission by performing a security fraud, right? Promising that he's a $540 share buyout from Saudi Arabia, which he didn't really. So he tried to manipulate the market. Fundamentally, he's a criminal, right? I mean, let's be clear about this, really, right? And he was punished by a CCA to surrender the chairmanship of the company, really. But if he would be such a quote-unquote celebrity, he would be in jail today, right? Now, look at what kind of weasel it is. I asked my friends in JP Morgan to prepare this graph, right? This is the CO2 compensation versus the company net income. Tesla never made any money, but who is the highest rewarded CEO in the whole American industry, right? Okay? So he's just playing you. He's just playing you. He's out there, right? You know, company losing money is playing you. And you see, the companies make money, right? Compare, you know, the GM, whatever, you know, companies which really run the world, you know, no matter if it's GM or GE or Google, that's somewhere there, and he's up there. Now, this is why I say that Tesla is not a car company, it's a cult company. There are believers in this cult of electric cars, and that's what it is, right? Now, of course, you know this, right? The Norwegians, because your government told you this will save the world, and they give you the remissions and rebates or whatever, so you jump on it. Nobody else. China, of course, China ordered its people, a social credit system, you have to behave for the party will punish you, so you got to buy electric cars. But elsewhere, you know, 2%, Germany, green Germany, 1.9%, not so green really, right? It's a diesel country which has no limit on the Autobahn, and so much for being green really, right? I love these German green lectures. Every car is a giant diesel weighing 2 tons and no limit on the Autobahn, you know? The efficiency of driving is what? Classically UCARF, right? Minimum at 50 kilometers, right? And when I go 250 on Autobahn, I'm spewing up 5 times as much CO2 really, right? You know? And Angela said, no, we cannot change that. That's our pride really, right? You know, that's, okay? Japan, 1% really. So if you think that the world is turning into Norway with Teslas, no, it isn't, as you see, right? Now, let me give you some numbers to see how it is not turning. Do you have an idea how many vehicles are out there globally? Because you see, everything is global. What happens in Norway? After all, Norway is less than Chicago, less than Toronto, right? I mean, you know, Norway is basically a city-state in terms of population, right? What is the total number of vehicles out there in the world? Somebody has done a number? 1.2 billion. 1.2 billion, right? How many electric cars are on the road as we speak now? About 5.5 million, right? Do your math, 5.5 million. How long it will take you to go? And 20 years ago, it was about 100,000. So 100,000, 20 years later, 5 million and plus. How long it would take you to go 1.2 billion, even if you double or triple the speed of buying these electric cars, right? It's like this 90% fossil fuels to go to zero, really, right? Okay. Now we get into cars. Forget about 18-wheeler. That's quite obvious, right? You know, forget even about flying. I have a real Norwegian example for you. I brought the Norwegian. Here is your pride. Yara Birkeland will operate this year, and it will be the first totally electric container ship, right? And here is the real container ship. This is the biggest one. It was launched in 2017. OCL Hong Kong, right? Now, I did a calculation for your benefit. Yara will carry what we call the 20 equivalent units, the standard steel box which you see everywhere, right? So Yara will have 120 of them. It will go at 6 knots. It will have power of 4 megawatts and range 30 nautical miles. OCL Hong Kong carries 21,413 of these containers. It has a speed 21, power of 80 megawatts, and a range of 12,000 kilometers. That's our nautical miles to bring it from Hong Kong or Shanghai to Hamburg or Tromsø or whatever, right? So when you do multiples, 178, 4.2, 20, 4,000. So capacity by range difference is 72,000, which is 4 orders of magnitude. So basically, you would have to get batteries 4 orders of magnitude better to have Yara Birkeland like real container ship, right? Not going to happen anytime soon. This is the Emeritus, which was the biggest one before that. Right? These are the calculations for Emeritus. If you replace the diesel engine, 80 megawatts, by electric drive, there is some saving because this is only 50% efficient, right? This is 90% efficient, right? So you need a smaller electric motor, will not weigh that much as these things. But nevertheless, that ship, even with future better batteries, would have to have something on the order of 64 tons of batteries, so 80 tons of batteries, right? So this ship carries like 100 plus tons of cargo, but you have to have like 60 or 80 tons of batteries, right? Not going to happen anytime soon, right? Now, it will happen if you get better batteries. And there is not a day going by when you wouldn't read a thing, oh, they developed a glass battery, flow battery, straw battery, you know, breathing air battery, whatever, right, you know. Just relax and turn the page and, you know, brew a cocoa, right? This is not going fast, you know. Original lead acid was 11. The key, this is not the only variable. There are many variables in batteries, but key is the energy density. How many watt-hours or joules per kilogram? Original lead acid, 1859, electron share cell, 11 watt-hours per kilogram. Right? Improved lead acid, the one which you have in your normal car, is about now 50 watts now. What do you have in Tesla 3 now? In 2000 is 247 watt-hours per kilogram. So keep it in mind, right? Tesla run by something which is about 250 watt-hours per kilogram, right? And baseline battery is about 285, right? And there will maybe something like 400, right? Okay. But diesel is about, kerosene about 13,000, right? So what we have here basically is 34 to 44 difference. So to equal diesel or kerosene, we need a battery 40 or 30 times more dense than we have, right? And this is the nice thing. I plotted all these development of batteries since the very beginning, right? And it's a beauty of it. It's a 4-parameter logistic curve, 0.9999. It's just absolute. I mean, I'm not saying it's a, you know, you should never use even 0.99 for forecasting, but it's an indicator, right? And the best thing is maybe like 2015, maybe we get to 500, right? Unless a miracle will happen. And miracles do happen, right? You know, if we are Catholic, especially miracles happen all the time, right? You know, new saints are named all the time. So maybe, you know, we will not just follow this, but maybe we'll just do something like that, right? Who knows? I don't know. You don't know, right? But the fact is, would I bet on that thing? You know, and I wouldn't really, right? Because so many people have concentrated on that. So many people are trying to get the holy grail of energy-dense battery. It's very unlikely we will have a 1,000 watt-hour per kilogram battery next year or next 5 years. Right? It will get better because remember, 1, 2, 3% it will get better, but it will get steadily better, right? And so this is the most important thing that it's just not easy to achieve. Now, suppose you would achieve the batteries, and suppose you would, you know, decarbonize transportation and then we are against this thing, these 4 pillars of modern civilization, this cement, ammonia, steel, and plastics, really. And you see what happened in past 50 years, right? Zooming up like crazy, right? And not only because of China, because of everybody everywhere, right? Everybody's using more plastics, you know, everything, right? These things, people don't think about these things. You know, just there's a piece of steel goes into a building, right? There's a plastic to pack your lunch, you know. You eat some food which was grown with fertilizing the crop with ammonia. This is what we call the embedded energies. These are the energies which you don't see, indirect use of energies, very intensive energies, right? It takes at least 20 gigajoules of energy per ton to produce primary steel, okay? It takes only 4 gigajoules per cement, but then we produce more than 4 billion tons of it. But it takes about 30 gigajoules per ton, and it takes about 100 and more gigajoules per every ton of plastics, right? So you do these multiplications, and you see that global fossil fuel consumption, these four things, you know, at least for 15% of the global consumption. And these are the most difficult things to, and they've gone up and up and up, all these things going up and up and up and up, right? Okay, let's go back to this. This is very difficult because either we do not have anything to replace what we have now, or we don't have anything on a scale to replace, right? Those of you who know, I mean, okay, this is the, as everybody says, energy capital of Norway. All these drilling rigs out there, this is steel in deep water, right? Well, how do you make steel? If I have lots of old steel, I can use an electric arc furnace, melt it, and get a new steel. But I will need lots of primary steel. So what do I need? I need to make pig iron. From that, I decarbonize, make steel, right? How do I make pig iron? Well, worldwide, we'll now make about 1 billion tons of pig iron, which means 1 billion tons of coke, right? In blast furnaces, right? And coke, I get my coke from coal, so I need 1 billion tons of coal. Do I have any other system to make 1 billion tons of primary iron without coke today? I don't really, right? Experimental thing we have, you know, we could do this direct reduction with hydrogen, but it's 1 billion tons, right? So we do, as of today, we have no commercial entity producing primary iron in any other way but using 1 billion tons of coke, right? So it's not going to change very rapidly, right? Cement. Those of you know about this big inclining kiln which rotates slowly. What do we burn underneath them? The cruddy, junky stuff we can get, like some bad, you know, the bottom of the crude oil barrel, some reject coal dust, whatever. Do we have any other things to produce that 4.4 billion tons of cement worldwide? No, we don't really, right, on scale, right? We can produce 100 million tons some other day, but not more than 4 billion tons. And then we come to ammonia, which is the most important thing. Before ammonia, the number of people on this planet was limited by the intensity of recycling of organic matter, right? If you would take every bit of organic matter, every bit of human and animal urine, feces, all the crop residues and recycle, this would be good for about 3 billion people. Another 4.5 billion people would not be on this planet because there wouldn't be enough food for them, right? And that's the result of Haber-Bosch synthesis of ammonia, right? How do you do it? Well, originally Bosch did it with hydrogenation of coal because Germany had no natural gas, but now most of the ammonia comes from natural gas. To get nitrogen is easy, right? We get it from here, right? I'm bumping into nitrogen like, you know, all the time here, right? So you freeze it out from the air, but you need hydrogen, and you get from natural gas, right? So we produce now about 180 million tons of ammonia, and we have no other easy way to do it, right? Oh, we have theoretically. We could make it from decomposition of water, get hydrogen, right? But there is not a single commercial plant doing it today, right? And again, going from 0 to 180 million tons, not going to happen next Monday, right? So decarbonization of these things is much more difficult than decarbonization of electricity or even decarbonization of transportation. Now, a few years ago, I wrote a little bit about these things, which are so favorite in Europe. I said, what I see when I see a wind turbine. Wind turbine to me is a perfect embodiment of fossil fuels, right? On land, you have to have these big bulldozers, these Komatsu and Caterpillar come and gouge out the huge foundations, right? Pour lots of concrete with reinforced steel, right? Erect a big steel tower. You see these fossil fuels just flowing into it, right? And on top of that steel tower, you put what? Huge 80-meter plastic blade made out of the hydrocarbon feedstocks. And when you are done, you pour it into the nozzle half a ton of what? Half a ton of lubricants, really. So if you notice at the bottom, 9% of fossil fuel are used for non-energy uses, mainly for lubricants. Extremely important, because without lubricants, nothing would turn really. Half a ton you pour into that thing, and you have to keep pouring, right? Because it keeps dripping or whatever. So when I look at a wind turbine, really, right? And of course, you have to take the line out of it, and what are the cables, right? Iron, steel or aluminum transformers. So wind turbine is a perfect embodiment of fossil fuels. Without fossil fuels, we couldn't build a single wind turbine today, right? And into it goes, hydrocarbon feedstocks, into it goes coal, into it everything, right? So let's not forget about that, right? Now people say, all right, maybe in future what will save us that we'll become so efficient that everything will be consuming a little of this. That's the problem. We are becoming efficient, right? The first Boeing and the latest one, 787. So per passenger kilometer, I'm sitting in the seat, right? I'm flying a kilometer. This is about like 70% more efficient. This is amazing. The plane looks pretty much the same, right? 2 engines, right? Wings, whatever. But per passenger kilometer, it's consuming 70% less energy. This is phenomenal since 1958. But look what happened to flying. From about this is the scale, right? From about 0.2 trillion passenger kilometers to something like 6 and bit percent. This is the fastest increasing mode of energy consumption on the planet, flying, right? How many Chinese tourists you've seen in Stavanger 10 years ago? 5 years from now, there'll be like 100 million of them coming every year, right? Because China barely started flying, right? So before too long, so we went from 0.2 to latest one is about 6 trillion passenger kilometers. The forecast by International Civil Aviation Organization for 2030 are 25 trillion, from 6 trillion today, right? And this is the most energy-intensive form of transportation, right? So despite the fact that per unit we got much more efficient, right? Per passenger kilometer, right? 70%, it's been totally swamped by the fact that people are flying. Then other people tell you, oh, the solution is in, let's keep this one. Solution is the distributed generation, right? Green people are absolutely enamored of distributed generation. Here I have my homestead, and I will just generate all the energy for my homestead. Well, if you are sitting like that, right? This is the suburban Ohio, and my friend lives. Well, I can pay for all of this, right? With solar panels, so I can erect a little wind turbine, right? I could distribute myself, so to speak, right? But as of 2007, more than 50% of humanity is living in cities, and most of the people soon will live in megacities, places more than 10 million people. Now, this is not easy to decentralize, really, right? I mean, you are going to erect your little wind turbine sideways here, or put out your solar things really out there, really, right? This is the future of humanity, already with us in Asia, right? Or this one, right? This is the modern way. This is Busan in South Korea, right? All these steel and concrete and glass towers, right? How will you decentralize this? For this, you have to have a giant multi-gigawatt power station delivering that thing reliably 24 hours a day. No wind, no solar, no decentralized, whatever will do this, right? Or this, This is my favorite city, Tokyo, Ikebukuro, one of the busiest wards in Greater Tokyo, right? Or this is Sao Paulo, right? This is the future of humanity. Future of humanity is not anything decentralized. It's ever more centralized, ever more reliable, ever bigger power, right? So what is the easiest way how to decarbonize? Well, this is it. This is gigajoules of primary energy per year per capita. US is about 300, Japan 150, EU is also around 150, right? Between 140 to 170, right? China 90, Brazil 60, India 20, Nigeria 5, Ethiopia 2. If all of us are willing to live at Ethiopian level, decarbonization problem solved overnight, really, right? If you are living at Nigerian level, fine. Indian level still manageable, right? But you see, China was at Indian level just 20 years ago. In 20 years, they were from 20 to 90, and they are not done yet. 90 is like Portugal was 30 years ago. Portugal didn't stop 30 years ago, really, right? And China will not stop. So China very likely will get to EU level in the next 20 years, to 150, really, right? And so on, right? So this is just the thing that we do not have any technical means, what I call the end-of-the-pipe solutions. We cannot keep doing what we are doing, producing all that steel, ammonia, flying for 29 euro, and then to have at the end of the pipe something which will suck out all that carbon dioxide from the air, right? Actually, people are talking about it, right? A friend of mine, David Keyes, I've known David for ages. He's now at Harvard and he has this company. And they were actually in California around this sucking out operation. And originally we removed 1 million tons a year. Please do your math. We produce 37 billion tons a year, right? 1 million tons a year. That's not even a hiccup. And suppose, I always use this calculation. Suppose you get serious about air removal, right? Suppose you put a target 10%, right? 10% would be roughly 4 billion tons of carbon, right? 4 billion tons of carbon. So think of it in terms of oil, which you people should understand. Global production of oil is now about 4 billion plus, okay? So I will have to establish an industry in terms of mass, roughly equivalent to oil industry, except oil industry does what? This. That industry would go against the gradient, take 4 billion tons of stuff, liquefy it or pressurize it, stuff it underground, and keep it there forever. Because if it comes back, what's the point of doing it, really, right? And after I've done all of that, and today we have zero of it, right? And after I would develop an industry equivalent to oil industry, which took us since 1860 to develop, I would be solving 10% of the problem, which, given the fact that India just announced a quintupling of coal consumption in the next 40 years, really, right, would be totally erased in the next 10 years, really, those 4 billion tons, really, right? So if you think that the carbon capture from the air and sequestration will solve our problem, right, you are totally dreaming. You are even beyond the German greenery, right? So the best way ahead is just simply to consume less, not consume as we do, and at the end of the pipe just somehow put some gizmos on it and kind of make it disappear, right? Unless we start consuming less, which means not flying to Cyprus, not buying giant cars, not buying, like American saffron, whatever, 5,000 square foot houses. In 1950, average American house was 100 square meters, 1,000 square feet roughly, right? Now it's 2,500, the average mass built house, and custom built house in US is now average 5,000 square feet. Well, do two people need 5,000 square feet? There are rooms in that house which they will never visit, really, right? And do you need to fly every third weekend to Cyprus or to Malaga or whatever? You didn't 30 years ago, and the world was all right. Yeah? So we have to drastically cut down, plus other things. One of the greatest embedded energy losses is the waste of food. Everywhere in the Western world, we lose between 40 to 50% of the food. Think of it, really. This is just absolutely criminal. We grow it using fertilizer, steel, irrigation, pumping, everything, and then we dump half of it, really, right? So what is the solution to all of these things? How do you reduce the consumption massively? This is it. You hit the people at the pocket very brutally, right? Our food is too cheap, our energy is too cheap, our flying is too cheap, cars too cheap. So we have to return. But you see, it's not so bad. When would you think was the last time when this continent consumed half as much energy as it's consuming today? Early 1960s. Was the life, those of you of certain age, right? Was the life unbearable in early 1960s? Really, right? No, it was quite bearable, right? Of course, it was more bearable in countries which you didn't have at the time anything, right? Just whatever, sardines and dry bread in 1960s. But still, life was certainly not. So people don't realize that we could go so far back, so much. You can do these calculations. If Europe is 150 and America is about 300, I could design you a society which will have a longevity as we have. Children will be happy and jumping around, good schooling, whatever. People eat well, really, except they will not have, all these extra high energy things. And you could be running the world with half as energy as we are consuming today, given the fact that we are constantly increasing efficiency as well. So it is doable, but it will require either, no matter what you call it, sacrifices or rational behavior, one or the other, right? It shouldn't be the contest there, but in any case, it will take a long time, it will be difficult, and we will not get there before 2030. We will not get there even before 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaclav, for that inspiring, realistic, fact-based talk. And I'm sure after so many facts and figures, the audience has some questions. Hands up.
Oh.
Speak in the box, please.
Really?
Other end.
That's a mic.
Hey. Oh, cool. That's cool. Thanks for a fascinating and interesting and provocative talk. You didn't say much about nuclear and thorium.
Yeah, you see, just the thing, 35 minutes. Nuclear is actually very simple. As you very well know, I will not dance around it. Nuclear in the West is dead, okay? The only country which is building is Finland now, right? And France, the last Flamanville unit, both over budget, over money, right? Like 10 years later, right? And there is no Germany officially out, really, right? And Italy never went in, really, right? So there is no demand for it anywhere in EU. In US, people always come up every week. Small, inherently safe nuclear reactor are coming. They've been coming since 1982. They are not here yet, right? So yes, in principle, nuclear could be done smart, on price. Chinese are doing it. Chinese are building on time, really, right? However, the question is, will it be secure 20 years later, really, right? They may build it rapidly, right? But So yes, it is an option, but in the West, it doesn't have, and as they say, social license, right? Nobody will vote for lots of nuclear power plants in the EU, and even in the US, the public opinion is turning now. They say, okay, we would welcome some of them, but to turn it into predominantly nuclear economy, I don't think there is any chance of that. Right? So the problem is that it's not even considered a part of the package now. Really, it has such a bad taste, right? Especially after Fukushima again. Really, so it's unfortunate because it would be nice to have it as a not 50, not 80%, but as a part of the package, right? But now in the West, the mood is so the only people who are building, right, are Chinese and Indian Russians, right? On scale and on large effort, right? So in the West, not much hope really. No.
Can I add one more? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. You joked a little bit about the electric cars in Norway, but you kind of concluded on hitting people's pockets in the end.
Yeah, absolutely, you have to.
So do you love or hate the Norwegian electric car policy?
Because you see, don't forget that everything which this is the thing that people forget, how cheap these things are, especially in North America, right? In North America, average household pays 8% of its disposable income for all forms of energy. Gasoline for car, natural gas heating of houses, right? Electricity, 8% of disposable income, right? Electricity, energy has never been so cheap in human history as it is now, really. And so this is why people waste it, really. People leave the lights on, people buy big cars, people big houses, really, right? So what is the other way? How you force people? Because people voluntarily will not buy smaller cars, I am driving Honda Civic, but all people around me are driving these big Mercedes or whatever, really. Voluntarily, most people will not go smaller and will not go, more thrifty. You have to hit them, really. I don't see any other way, really, right? And especially food. Food is especially egregious, because wasting half of it after we grow it, really, right? It's a criminal act, fundamentally. And people are not even aware, because food, if you look at the food system, this is funny. Food itself takes only 2-3% of total energy to produce. But the whole food system, right? Processing it, trucking it, freezing it, selling it, bringing home, 15 to 20% of our global energy system is dancing around food, really, right? As we speak, there are huge tankers taking soybeans from Brazil to China, really. As we speak, there are all these freezing ships taking frozen beef from Argentina to France, right? It's a huge world system. So very intensive, and then we throw away half of it, really, right?
We have one more question over here, please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Smil. Thank you. It's clearly that you are working in the energy sector, and I'm sure your speech has in itself inspired a lot of energy around. It was very, very, very interesting and challenging. I would just like, from my point of view, to say that it is a bit dangerous to give the impression that everything is going so slow. I am, among many in the industry here, is actually working close and seeing disruptive change every day. I just came back from South Africa, where the ESCOM and the government now has concluded that coal no longer has a future in South Africa.
Yeah.
Because they cannot finance it.
Right.
A few years ago, they only talked about coal. So what I'm saying is that, yes, you are right, things go too slow. Yes, we probably need to reduce energy consumption, but the change is actually taking place much faster than I would say overall you convey as an impression. And then my question is, if you talk about the efficiency, if we succeed to do what is recommended to increase the rate of electrification from about 25-30% to 70-80% within 30 years, that within itself
absolutely.
That would lead to a significant, reduce of the overall energy consumption of our primary energy resources. So that is a way, and that is my second question, is when you talk about change. If we compare to the Second World War, I mean, the amount of change that was able to be done led by President Roosevelt in the United States during a couple of years, is the transition we are facing very challenging when you look at what one was able to do during the Second World War?
But okay, so two things. In the first place, I did mention that coal is disappearing very rapidly in the US, right? But it's disappearing why? Well, because it's replaced conveniently by natural gas. So it's a bad fossil fuel replaced by better fossil fuel, right? But it's not replaced by wind or solar, right? So that change could be fast precisely because we have technology to take the steam turbine fueled by coal away and put a gas turbine fueled by natural gas in, right? It's available, right? Unlike the things for steel, ammonia, whatever. As far as the electrification, I'm all for, you know. I mean, let's electrify just about everything. Except, as I pointed out, it's difficult to electrify production of pig iron, production of plastic, synthesis of plastic, production of ammonia, and very difficult to electrify trucking and the container ships and flying. So there are many things which are difficult. So everything which could be electrified, let's electrify, right? However, if I would have time, I would have gone into fuel cells versus electrics. The fact that people are now betting on electric cars, right? This Tesla mania, and you have to order basically to buy them. This may be actually the wrong choice in long run. I'm just writing a longish paper now about the fact that in long run, my bet is on fuel cells and hydrogen, right? So this may be a wrong bet. Would be the first time in history when we betted on the wrong thing. It would be in this room in 1975, a sorted expert would be telling you, oh, by this time, everything will be nuclear electricity, right? We were absolutely convinced in 1975 that, and not only will be a fission, we thought everything will be fast breeder reactors or fusion even, really, right? So in energy field, we are used to bet on wrong horses all the time, really, right? So your Tesla is fine, for next 5-10 years, it's okay, right? These fuel cells are not happening, again, slow development, but this may be a wrong choice, really. So, but otherwise, yes, I am in favor of electrifying everything you can, except, we had the coldest winter in 40 years, minus 52 chill factor, right? I am glad to have my natural gas furnace, 97% efficient in my basement, right? Because how would I do it with solar when the day is like whatever, 6 hours long and it's minus 52 wind chill factor? So heating is one of those things also. You can electrify heating, right? You can, of course you can. But in cold climates, in Siberia and Manitoba, right, it's very difficult to electrify heating, right? So I'm all for electrification of everything possible, but let's recognize there are serious limits to flying, heating, etc., right?
Thank you very much, Vaclav.
Thank you.
You certainly don't conserve your own energy. Lucky for us. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.